Well, thank you, Sarah. It's really a pleasure to be here and to extend our work with St. James's Place Wealth Management.
That's great. Now, before we dive into exactly what is going on in the markets, I'd like to talk to you more about your approach to investing. So you've made a name for yourself as a contrarian investor, but not just a knee-jerk contrarian. You've referred to your style as smart contrarianism before. So I was wondering if you could just summarize your investment philosophy for us and how it's evolved over time.
Well, I guess the key elements in my philosophy are risk control and consistency. And, risk control is very important. Basically, although it's not easy to believe at this moment, I think it's easy to make money in the markets. And, it's especially easy when the markets go up, and 7 or 8 years out of 10, the markets go up. So that's not a problem. I think the mark of the professional investor is the ability to make money with risk under control. You can make money by abandoning risk and risk control, and 7 years out of 10 or 8 years out of 10, that'll work great. In the other 2 or 3 years, not having risk control will really cause serious damage to be inflicted. I think it's important to outperform the market when the market does poorly. That's what we want to do. That's what our clients want to do, more importantly. Now, if you establish your portfolio so that you will beat the market when it does poorly, there's a decent chance that you can't beat it also when it does well. Risk control means limiting the leverage in your portfolio, the riskiness of the companies you invest in, the riskiness of the instruments, for example. And the truth is that in the good years, the highest returns often go to the person who takes the most risk. And that's not us. But I think that, our goal is I think the mark of a great investor, again, something else, is what I call asymmetry. You do better in the good years than you do badly in the bad years. So what we really try to do is have performance which is average or slightly above average in the good years. And by the way, I don't think it's important to beat the market in the good years because everybody makes a lot of money. The average is good enough. But then substantially above average in the bad years. The combination of the two will give you above average performance over the long run with below average volatility and risk. Now, that leads to consistency. And our clients want consistency. I think they come to us for consistency. And we rarely are we at the top of the performance distribution, other than maybe in the worst of times. But we're never at the bottom. And again, that's what our clients want. So, our whole life is devoted to doing these things. Now, how do you do them? You're active in less than efficient markets where not everybody knows everything, not everybody feels good about everything. We want some things they feel bad about, because that's where you get the bargains. Number 2, high degree of specialization. And each of our funds does one thing. Each of our people does one thing. It's hard to outperform if you're a jack of all trades. And then, we don't base our performance on market forecasts or macro forecasts. It's hard to do that correctly. And we're not market timers. It's hard to get in and get out and get in and get out at exactly the right time. It's better to hold throughout, maybe adjusting your aggressiveness or defensiveness with the times, and then with a portfolio that can give that asymmetry that I discussed over time. Nobody should base their approach to the market on agility. It's very hard to be agile at the right time. It's very hard to know what the right time is. And so I think that those are the elements in my philosophy. Now, you mentioned contrarianism. And contrarianism is very important. And basically what it consists of is understanding the excesses of investor psychology. And number 1, not being part of them. And number 2, taking advantage of them. 90% of what you have to know about market behavior, especially about short-term market behavior, is that in real life, things fluctuate between pretty good and not so hot. But in the market, investors go from flawless to hopeless and flawless to hopeless. And nothing's ever flawless and nothing's ever hopeless. And what that means simply, Sarah, is that when people think the outlook is flawless, they're too optimistic and they're going to be disappointed. So you want to turn cautious at that moment. And when people think that the outlook is hopeless, things are never hopeless. And when pessimism is overdone and people think the outlook is hopeless, it's important to turn aggressive. So we do modify our stance between aggressiveness and defensiveness, but as I said, we never get in and out of the markets. That's really just too hard to do well. Contrarianism, leaning against the excesses of psychology, is an important part of what we do.
I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit for us, Howard, that the excesses of investor psychology, understanding them, taking advantages of the swings between, flawless to hopeless.
If you look at a chart of GDP over the years, it kind of looks like this. It fluctuates slightly, but I know the U.S. Facts best. Our GDP grows about 2%, sometimes 3%, sometimes 1%, rarely -1%, rarely 4%. So the fluctuations in the trends are modest. Now, if you look at the trend in company profits, it looks more like this. The fluctuations are more pronounced. Why is that? Companies are affected by the trends in the economy, but they have leverage. They have financial leverage and operating leverage, which means what that means is that when sales go down 2%, profits go down 20%, et cetera. So profits fluctuate considerably more than GDP. Now, if you look at a chart of the stock market, it goes like this. It fluctuates wildly. Why does if you think about it, the investing is taking an interest in companies' profits. Why do the prices of investments fluctuate so much more than company profits? The answer is psychology. And, as I said before, investors go from flawless to hopeless and hopeless to flawless. And they overdo the good news and they overdo the bad news. And so, at the extremes, if possible, you want to turn aggressive when everybody else is terrified, and you really want to turn defensive when everybody else is carefree. But those opportunities don't come along very often. We don't have profitable chances to do that very often. Most of the time, we're straight down the middle. But my second book was called Mastering the Market Cycle, and I was talking to my son about it, and I said, Andrew, I think most of my market calls have been about right. And he said, yeah, Dad, that's because you did it 5 times in 50 years. 5 times in my career, there have been chances when psychology was so crazy and prices were so high or so depressed and security prices were so low that you could really accomplish a great deal by turning hyper defensive or hyper aggressive, but normally not so.
Okay, so it sounds like the key takeaways there for our client behaviors have something to do with understanding the extremes while still taking into account their long-term objectives.
And most of the time, just staying on course for your long-term objective. Worrying about, I was asked last week, my first book was called The Most Important Thing. And an interviewer last week said to me, well, what's the least important thing for investors? And I thought for a minute, I hadn't had that question before. The least important thing is the short run. Everybody's obsessed with what is going to be inflation over the next 6 months. What will the central bank do in terms of interest rates to fight the inflation? And will the changes in interest rates produce a recession? This is what everybody wants to know. And consequently, of course, what will happen to security prices in the next 6 months? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. That's not what matters. If you think those are all short-term considerations. It's all about the next 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, whatever it might be. Number one, we really can't know much about the short run. Number two, if we develop an opinion about the short run, we shouldn't have too much confidence in it. It's hard to get that right. Number three, nobody should change their portfolio wholesale in response to what they think is going to happen over the next 6 months. And number four, it's not, the next 6 months isn't what matters. My clients and your clients should be investing for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And if you have a position today, what happens in the next 6 months is probably not going to affect the outcome of the next 20, 30 years. And so why does everybody care about it so much? And the answer is, it's kind of like social media. It's all around us. People are talking about it all the time. The newspapers talk about it. The talking heads on TV talk about it. And everybody gets on TV and they said, well, do you think there's going to be a recession in 6 months? No, I don't think so. Yes, I think it's bad. Yeah, not too bad, but pretty bad. This isn't what matters. And people drive themselves nuts with these matters, and they hurt their performance. Because look at the markets today. The markets are well down, and everybody's afraid about what's going to happen in the next 6 months. And if people get out today because they're concerned about what's going to happen in the next 6 months, and it's going to be very hard to decide when to get back in, because if the market goes down, it's going to be because the news is terrible. And if the news is terrible, most people are not going to have the intestinal fortitude to get back in, and they'll probably miss a rise. So you can't do that timing thing very well. You might as well abstain from trying, in my opinion, because most of your efforts are going to be counterproductive. You're going to sell because you're depressed, which means prices are depressed and things are on sale. That's not the right time to sell. And you're going to buy when you feel good. And usually your good feelings will coincide with buoyant, meaning high-priced markets. And that's not the time to buy. So steady as you go is a much better idea than in, out, in, out.
So, this concept of adhering to your philosophy and your process, irrespective of the headlines, that's a really powerful message for our clients. Now, you often reference this concept of second-level thinking. Could you unpack what exactly that means and how our clients could perhaps adopt a similar mindset?
Well, second-level thinking really is a matter of understanding that the things people are trying to do in the market. Now, you can buy and hold, and you don't even have to think. If you're a long-term investor, you're absolved of the responsibility of thinking and making these decisions on a short-term basis. Just buy a good portfolio. Hopefully, we'll help you select a good portfolio and hold it. You don't have to be a genius. But some people want to further enhance their returns by either getting in or getting out, turning aggressive, turning defensive, or selecting securities that will do better than the rest. These are active management tactics that you can adopt if you want to try it. Not easy. And kind of, I would say, embroider around the edges. The main thrust of your return is going to come from what did the markets you're invested in do in the long run, the markets and the companies. But if you want to try, you could buy a bunch of high yield bonds today and let's say make 8%, 9%. You say, no, I'd like to try to make 10. So you can try to get in, get out, turn aggressive, defensive, or select the ones that will do better and avoid the ones that will do worse. You can try these active management measures. But to do that, you have to think at a different level than other investors. Other investors, on average, are going to make 9.